I'm the CEO at Sairi. So it gives me pleasure this afternoon to welcome all of you, Siyaphumelela, the colleagues, institutional leaders, partners of Siyaphumelela. So we thank you so much for making the time at a time when we know during the year it's quite busy to come to this meeting. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging at the front our chair for the meeting today, Prof. Max Price. Prof, we are so grateful for you accepting this invitation to come and help us in this discussion. It's so meaningful because Prof doesn't need an introduction to most, if not all of you. As a long-standing champion of student success, a leader in transformation in higher education. So thank you so much, Prof. I will be handing over to Prof shortly, just a few minutes. All right, so to everyone here today, so your presence also means a lot for us. And it matters because student success in South Africa cannot be achieved by one institution acting on its own, one program, a funder, or a policy, but it will only be achieved through collective action across the education system. And so that is why we are here today. Siyaphumelela has grown into a national student success movement over the past 12 years, starting from an initiative launched by Saidi in partnership with Kresge Foundation and 5 founding partners. Today, growing into a national initiative partnering with 20 of the 26 public universities in South Africa. And the other 6, they still participate. And we have a number of them as well. I think all the 26 universities are actually in the room today. So thank you for coming. We have made significant progress, as you will hear, as the afternoon goes along over the past 12 years, with quite some substantial gains that we are going to take a moment to share around. But of course, even 12 years down the line, this work remains so important, it remains critical and urgent. Least of all, because we are operating in a post-school environment which is under growing pressure and deepening pressure. It's pressure from public finances, from constrained public finances, pressures from rising student need, pressure from widening inequality, pressure for institutions to adapt to the rapid technological changes and the increasing demands from the shifting labor market. We must also confront a deeply troubling truth. And that truth is that a growing number, too many young people still arrive in our institutions already at a disadvantage, carrying the weight of an uneven schooling system where they are coming from, under financial stress from their families, facing food insecurity and uncertainty, housing insecurity, mental health pressures, digital exclusion, and many other challenges. And too often, these students find that they shoulder the burden of navigating those obstacles, while the system is more focused on retention, graduation, and throughput rates. Rightfully so, don't get me wrong. But remember, behind every retention rate, behind every throughput achievement, behind every graduation statistic that we are talking about, there is a person, a student, whose life trajectory is at stake here. It's about Rulani, the young girl from Guyana, who is excited to be a first-generation student from a family, and indeed from a community. She arrives at the institution with extraordinary promise, but she spends the first weeks of the academic year wondering not whether she's going to succeed in a course at the end of the year, but she's stressing about whether she's going to be able to register on time, whether she will be able to stay registered because she's not up to date with her fees, whether she will be able to find accommodation or afford the next meal. It's about Modise, the young boy from Kuruman, who finds himself in the big city for the first time in his life, without any form of support, suddenly cut from all the forms of support that he had come used to in his growing up. But he still, under those challenging circumstances, he does everything that's asked of him. He has managed to gain admission. He works hard. He attends all his lectures, submits his assignments on time. He seeks help when he's facing trouble, but still, he keeps encountering many roadblocks because the system was not designed with someone of his background, a rural upbringing, in mind. And this is what Siyaphumelela has been about and continues to be about, enabling the conditions that make access and success possible for Rulani and for Modise and for thousands of other Rulanis and Modises like them. And that's why this leadership forum is so important. We are so thankful to have this big gathering of senior leadership from institutions here today. It's not simply a reflection moment in the life of Siyaphumelela, but it's a strategic moment for us to start asking and engaging with other deeper questions. What must we do to sustain all the gains from the past 12 years of Siyaphumelela? Not just because it makes a difference, but because this work is needed now more than it has ever been before. We are also deeply thankful for the generous support of the Kresge Foundation, who have invested upwards of 240 million rand in Siyaphumelela since its launch. And that includes close to 90 million rand in the current cycle in grants to the 20 institutional partners. And as we approach the end of the current cycle of the partnership with Kresge in August 2027 next year, our purpose today should not only be to start shaping the future of Siyaphumelela together, but it's also to reflect how will we sustain this work beyond or with limited support from Kresge or indeed other philanthropic partners. And so it is with this mind that we are approaching the document, the framework that we shared with you ahead of the meeting. We hope you had some time to read or at least to browse through it on the way. The purpose of the framework is not only for us to define a shared agenda for the next chapter of Siyaphumelela, but it's also to determine how we sustain this work, while at the same time broadening its scope to address the growing need across the entire PSET system, beyond just the university sector. So I want to thank you once again, all of you, for your leadership, for your championship, for your commitment over the past 12 years of Siyaphumelela, and say to you, we have never needed you more before than we do now as we shape this next chapter. So thank you for coming to the conversation. I hope in the next couple of hours, you will continue to be, as you have been before, very engaging, very critical with the questions, because out of the critical questions, that's where comes the richness of the conversation and indeed the richness of the vision that we are shaping together. So with this, it's my pleasure to hand over to Prof. Max Price to take us through the rest of the conversation today. So Prof, over to you.
Thank you, Innocent. You've said almost everything that has to be said. I'll just highlight firstly a reminder. You've probably almost all of you have been in these leadership meetings forums before. The main conference starts tomorrow, but this meeting reflects the fact that Siyaphumelela recognizes that unless the leadership has not only bought into the programs, but shaped the programs, they won't succeed. They won't get traction. And so this afternoon's work is to do exactly that, to look at the proposed new framework, to help identify gaps, to comment on the proposals, and to allocate tasks and decide how we take it forward. And we're really grateful to all of you for being here. Just to remind you, as by way of welcome, who's in the room, we have, excuse me, we have some Siyaphumelela scholars themselves, too, I think. We have a representative of the Vice Chancellors. I think it's only Prof. Francis Peterson. Are there any other Vice Chancellors here at the moment? I don't want to miss them out. A whole lot of Deputy Vice Chancellors, Deans, and Senior Directors of these programs in their respective universities. We have government leadership from the Department of Higher Education, from SAQA and the other organs of government, CHE. We have representation from USAF, the Vice Chancellor's organization, in the form of Dr. Peter Mbati. Welcome to you. The Kresge Foundation, of course, Bill Moses, who's going to take the podium next. And we're very delighted to have one of the trustees, Ms. Untitled Jenkins. Thank you for joining us, for coming all the way. We hope that you will be impressed with what you see Kresge has facilitated and enabled, and help to continue that. We have, of course, the SADI leadership present, and people working within SADI, and also the Siyaphumelela coaches. So it's really all the people who make this work and who have to provide the leadership that are in this room this afternoon. And as was said by Mr. Nkata, we're going to reflect very quickly through Bill Moses' presentation on the history of the last 12 years and the three phases, the three major phases that Siyaphumelela has been through since its founding in 2014, or since its launch in 2014. Then we're going to look at the framework that has been developed and proposed for the next phase. And then we'll break into small groups at your tables to discuss the framework in more detail, interrogate it, comment on it, and then we'll come again together. We'll have a presentation. I presume we are going to have a presentation from Achieve the Dream. Is that right? Yeah. Right. That's the virtual presentation. Yeah. And then we'll do a wrap up. So I'm sure this is going to be a stimulating afternoon, and we welcome you all to participate. And with that, I invite the Executive Director for this, Bill Moses, to talk about the past and the future. You're going to be projected.
Yes.
I'm going to go and sit down.
Okay. Can you put up the slides, please? So thanks, Max, and thank you, Innocent, for that. And I want to thank, again, all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that for some of you, the fact that Keir Starmer has left his job means the world is turned upside down. But I also want to thank my colleagues, Wendy Lewis-Jackson, and also who is the head of the managing director of our Detroit program at Kresge, and Santil, who's our trustee. And if you've heard great things about how Detroit is really turning around and revitalizing, these two women are the women that we thank at the Kresge Foundation. So please do introduce yourselves if you get a chance. And I'd also, of course, love to thank Sadie and all of the staff there for all of the hard work that they put into this. There it goes. So this is just the presentation outline. We can sort of skip that. I'm going to spend some time on slide 3. And just for all, I think most of you know who Kresge is, but just in case this is the first time you've been involved with Siyaphumelela, Kresge Foundation is a more than 100-year-old private foundation based in Detroit, Michigan in the USA. We've been working in South Africa since the late 20th century. Oh, thanks. Since the late 20th century. And mostly on building the capacity of South African universities to better serve their students and communities. Now, this is not the first time that we've convened a group of leaders to talk about the work we could be doing in South African higher education. And in 2011, 2012, we convened about 12 VCs in Cape Town to talk about what do they think should happen. And that group included actually Max Price when he was at UCT as VC. And I'm delighted that Max is going to be with us today, getting us going, facilitating and moderating our discussions. And while many of you may take it for granted that student success is an important priority of the government and at your institution and in many NGOs in South Africa, it was not true in 2011, 2012, 2013. And so this idea that this is just something that everybody does was not, in fact, something that everybody did. And back in 2011, the consensus from the VCs was clear. They wanted to improve success rates, throughput rates in South African universities. And they'd heard that we were working on similar kinds of issues in the United States, especially with community colleges at Achieving the Dream. And they thought, is there anything that we could do here that might be helpful? So we followed that up with a book, a report, Student Success and Access, Issues and Interventions of South African Universities by Thandi Lewin. Is Thandi here yet? I think she's going to be here maybe later or tomorrow. But Thandi Lewin, along with Monica Mawayo, she literally wrote the book on South African student success. And of course, now she's Deputy Director General at the DHET. So we're really quite thrilled at the trajectory of the last 10, 12 years and how things have changed so much. And what Thandi and Monica did, though, is what the VCs knew to be true, but what they did was they documented what the challenges were in South Africa and what was already happening. And just to roll back in a time machine, South Africa was trying to support students, but they were invariably small boutique programs that were disconnected to other things, often rooted in well-meaning but very ad hoc efforts on individual campuses. That often began at predominantly white institutions in the 1980s, and when very few numbers of Black students or underrepresented students were on those campuses. But by 2012, we'd seen enrollment more than double, and it was approaching 1 million students. And we saw a huge influx of Black students coming to South Africa's universities. They were now free to go to any institution in the country, and they were eager to do so. But there were still some challenges that even though there were many more students, the outcomes for those students were still the same as they'd been in the apartheid era. So that hadn't really improved. More students, but the outcomes weren't any better. And so we had these difficult equity challenges that institutions were failing to adapt to the needs of the students who are now the majority of their students on most of our campuses. And that included, of course, weak high school preparation and not a significant amount of material resources that they could bring when they got to campus, like some of the students that Innocent talked about. It was also really unclear what worked. One vice chancellor said to me, he said, they tell me everything works, but everything can't work as well as something else. Something's got to be better and something's got to be worse. And if you're going to try to reform an institution, you need to know what works so you can use your political capital to make real changes. Many institutions really had also no leveraging of technology. They were still rooted in what they were doing 30 years earlier. And the engagement was also difficult for universities with students. And the universities saw their students as almost problematic. They wish they had a different set of students. There was a screening out mindset as opposed to getting students to actually master the work. They were thinking, well, if they're not there, that's the way it goes. And universities rarely sought out insights from students. And so that's why I'm glad, I know Zoe's here as a student. I'm so glad that there are people who are here who represent the voices of the people who you're actually serving, which is all those students, the 1 million students that are in the South African higher education, public higher education system. And of course, huge numbers of students were dropping out with significant debt and that had real institutional and personal costs that had to be borne. And of course, a lot of those problems were rooted in Bantu education, but the problem had been is that you had a systematic process in Bantu education to exclude students and to not ensure their success. And it was being solved by ad hoc, tiny little boutique solutions all over the place, as opposed to a more systematic solution on campuses and nationally. And so many of us argued that South Africa needed an equally systemic approach to what had brought us time. So in 2014, we began the Siyaphumelela initiative. We sought to use data and to look at things with an equity lens to see how we could address what was really happening, have the voice of students involved, and to analyze what initiatives, new or old, or that could be developed that would really work for our students in this work. It was experimental, so we started out with just 5 institutions because frankly, we didn't know if it would work or not. So we wanted to see, could we get some traction in South Africa? By 2019, we saw traction and we said, let's expand it to 7 institutions. And that also included an associate institution and 9 participating institutions that didn't get direct grants, but were part of the network and got some support in other ways. We also got really good relationships developed with DHET, with CHE, USAF, and other groups to gain their insights, to make sure that we weren't inadvertently, and SALDRU, we weren't inadvertently stepping on other initiatives and efforts that were designed to address these same problems. In fact, we were complementing or substituting where they couldn't do something. And then in 2024, we expanded to 20 universities in the system out of the 26, and that was to scale things and work collectively on a national scale. And as all of you know, this engagement includes technical assistance, convenings, an annual conference, uniform data collection, evaluations, opportunities to learn from other institutions, both in South Africa and abroad, regional networks, and specific work streams focused on issues like advising or basic needs. So today, things have really changed. We have a strong network of the 20 universities that are using data evidence, student voice, student-centeredness, and collaboration to improve student success and institutional effectiveness on a large scale. As you can see, 80% of all students in South Africa in public universities are now attending the Siyaphumelela institution. We've seen 1,500 staff trained, and at least, and we've also seen significant investment, about 240 million rand over the last dozen years. Of course, we don't know everything, but the results have been gratifying. We've seen real successes in addressing throughput on a broad scale. We have a new evaluation of the program that will come out in early 2027. I think is it early 2027? I think it is. Yeah. But the first year retention now, that is the students who are being kept and continuing on, is now around 90% of the Siyaphumelela 2.0 institution. So that first and the second group have now achieved that level of retention. And places like UKZN, as you can see, UKZN, UWC, and Durban University of Technology have seen significant throughput gains. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary. 23% gain in 4-year degrees with significant improvement. And then the other one is also on the equity side. So we're seeing at places like UKZN and UWC and DUT, significant improvement in throughput gains in minimum time. So these are students who are finishing, if it's a 3-year degree, they're finishing in 3 years, or they're finishing in 3+1, not 3+2 or 3 or 4. So we're helping to support them so they can actually succeed in that work. We've also seen real changes, sort of transformational across the system. At this point, we increasingly do know what works for South African students to improve attainment. At the University of the Free State, African students have increased their pass rates by 15% in high-impact modules. And again, instead of weeding out students, the idea is we're supporting them to master their chosen fields. NSFAS students at UKZN and UFS are now, let's see, is that there? Here, are now outperforming their non-funded peers. And at WITS, you've seen complete parity between NSFAS students and non-NSFAS students. UFS has also significantly reduced the student performance gap between African and white students by 9%. We've seen student success elevated to a strategic priority at the highest level of universities and in government. Siyaphumelela has fostered collaboration at all levels, both within institutions and among the network. Isolated boutique programs haven't disappeared. There's still people, and that's not necessarily bad if they've got an idea to test, but what we want is them to test it, not just to go for it. But we're seeing, though, more and more collaborative scaled programs. And instead of relying on anecdote and gut to determine what works, we now have the data and the skills to collect and analyze it to determine what works best for our students. And we've seen this work gain international attention. In 2020, You didn't see it because everyone was busy getting toilet paper and wipes, but it was in February, March 2020, EDUCAUSE, a US-based technology organization, cited Siyaphumelela as one of the best exemplars for the use of data in student success. So as Innocent said, don't forget though, as great as these statistics are, as great as the improvements are, they represent real people whose parents, who they also had dreams to succeed in post-secondary, post-school education. And these are real people who will change the trajectory of the lives of themselves and of their families, of their communities, and of South Africa as a whole. And while we've seen a lot of success, there are things that are left to do. And I'm going to invite Innocent to talk about the rest of the story.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So are we back on screen? Yep. Okay. Right. So as Bill just concluded on that note, as we've kept on saying, Siyaphumelela has made such significant progress over the past 12 years. And thanks to the leadership of all of you in the room, and we know there are thousands of other student success champions that will be congregating with us starting tomorrow. So from the expanded access that Bill was just talking about, from the institutional change, we have seen institutions increasingly centering student voice and student participation, and indeed student success at the center of institutional culture and transformation. Particularly the use of data, which is such a core part of the Siyaphumelela model. We have seen such an increasing institutional capacity to use data in real time to be able to identify where those bottlenecks, where those roadblocks are for students, and be able to intervene timely. But as we have been saying, so it's several battles that we have been winning, but the war itself is still going on. So this challenge is growing even more. Graduate outcomes continue to be uneven, particularly across the demographics. The pressures from the world of work, the changing pressures from the world of work that we're hearing. So I was just looking yesterday at the recently published statistics by Stats SA of specifically on graduate unemployment, which is citing that so quarter one of 2026 graduate unemployment is now at 12.2%, and that's up by 1.8% from 10.4% in quarter four of 2025. So obviously that's a trend that we're gonna, the pressures, if these pressures are not addressed, that's a scary trend that we kind of, we don't want to see it continue marching up, because but over the past 12 years, or maybe before that, having a university or a college degree was always a sure way. And it does indeed continue to be one of the surest ways to gainful employment. But those kind of that data that we are seeing, we should be very protective about the gains. So it's not just celebrating them, but if we don't protect those gains, there's a risk that we might lose them. So that's what the next chapter of Siyaphumelela is all about. Apologies for the small text that you want. We will make sure that after this meeting we will share this slide deck with you to have the detail. But saying the next chapter of Siyaphumelela is really about continuing to protect the gains from the past 12 years, to deepen impact in the higher education sector across all the 26 institutions that we have been working with. But critically, the conversation that is now starting to emerge across the country and gaining some sort of agency is about youth pathways to gainful employment, to meaningful participation in the economy. So it's going to continue to be important for us to continue deepening and achieving the high student outcomes, anchoring this in institutional transformation as we have always been doing. But now increasingly the aspiration of Siyaphumelela is no longer just for us to be satisfied with changes with impact at institutional level. But how do we translate this into systemic change? And that systemic change for us, it starts by broadening to look at beyond the university sector. It's the entire post-school education and training space, the PSET space, because that's where critically the mass of young people that are clamoring for a pathway to employment is. And ultimately, of course, it's the societal impact with the growing importance of employability and economic mobility. And so indeed, with this leadership conversation, we are kicking off a very important conversation this week with the Siyaphumelela conference. You would have noticed that we decided to keep the theme the same as last year, reimagining student success and expanding opportunity for all. And critically, that's expansion, as you will come to learn throughout the rest of the week. Is speaking to amplifying employability and economic mobility for young graduates. And so finally, speaking to, so how is it that, so again, apologies for the small text. You can only see it in outline. We will share it here. So what this is seeking to do, this is a top line and overview, a graphical visual to illustrate the aspiration behind the collective framework for Siyaphumelela that we are proposing to guide the vision and shared agenda for Siyaphumelela in the next chapter. So you will see right up to there, the leadership forum, so reflecting the importance that we are assigning to this gathering of leaders, because as I said earlier on, you have been at the forefront, at the coalfaces of leading this initiative right from the beginning. And so going forward, we want to continue to recognize the importance of and centrality of leadership. And then, of course, the other arrangements that we'll be talking about a little bit more as the conversation go. But I just particularly wanted to flag to the left, to the extreme left here, the proposed, some of the key elements of the proposed shared agenda around what should we prioritize as a collective. What should we prioritize to continue to amplify this impact, to expand the reach and the impact of Siyaphumelela beyond where it has been operating over the past 12 years. So I'll just hasten as I prepare to hand over to Prof now to come and lead us through the next part of the conversation, that the collective framework that we've shared, it's not a plan, it's not a strategic plan, it's not an implementation plan, but it's the beginnings of what we are proposing to be the vision and the shared agenda. It's really, as you would have seen, it's quite broad, it's quite aspirational, and some would say it's very ambitious in its outlook. And that's what at this level we are intending it to be. Very bold, very aspirational as a shared agenda across the PSET system. But of course, once we have set that agenda, we're going to have to step back, come back to reality and kind of say, in the short to medium term, what are the realities of what we actually have to grapple with? What are those top priorities? What are the funding, the financing constraints that we have to grapple with? And so in the short term, as we work towards this vision, what is it that we have to prioritize? And so we hope that part of the conversation today will help us to surface some of those insights. And of course, indeed, to continue working towards this framework in the coming couple of weeks, couple of months, until such a time we get to a point where we say, this is something that it's a vision, it's an aspiration that we can all share together and work towards. So with that, we'll stop boring you more, and we'll invite Prof to come and lead us through the next part of the conversation. So that's the end of PowerPoints. We don't have any more PowerPoints today. So it's just a conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm just thinking that you probably sat down at tables with people you knew and like, and therefore are probably similar to, and that isn't the most productive way to have a discussion. So what I'm going to start by asking you to do is every second person at your table. So you're number 1, you don't count. 2, 4, 6 at that table. Please get up. 2, 4, and 6. Take your bags with you, everything, because you're not coming back. And then you should go to that end table, please. And number 2, the 1, 3, and 5 are staying put. Okay. So 2, 4, and 6 are moving. Won't you get up, please, and go to the next table? And 4 go to that table. There we go. And while they're doing that, 2, 4, and 6, please, from the next table. Would you stand up, take your bags, and I'll distribute you through different tables. That's it. You've managed to count yourselves correctly. The woman in red, won't you come to this table, please? Won't you go to the far table? And sir, if you would come to this table here. Okay, I could have said do this on your own, but it would have taken us half an hour, and we don't have time for that. Which table? Yeah, that's okay, right. Okay, now it's going to get a little more complicated, right? So now from your table, 1, 3, and 5, please. Won't you, 1, 3, and 5 get up to move? Eh? Not your table. No, you're going to move around to all the tables after. From that table, 1, 3, and 5. And from that table, 1, 3, and 5. Francis is 1. I can't see. If you get up and then go to 3 other tables, please. And at the last table, are you still all the same who sat down together? Yes, you are. So let's have number 2 and 4 from your table at the end there. And number 2 and 4, as long as you haven't already moved, here. And we're number 4 and number 2, up. Move around, please. Okay, we need one person here. One person at this table here. Tia's going there. That's good. And if you have, which table did you come from? Yeah, so if you would join this table here, please. So we've got 6 there. We've got 6 there, and it's a different, you've got 5 there. We need one more there. So won't you please, you have either, yeah. So if you move and to this table here, and number 2, if you would move to that table, please. Table had 6 as well. Okay, are you sufficiently mixed up? I think so. Your table is a bit thin. So won't the you two tables combine? You've got 3 and 3. So yeah, so that you've got a table of 6. I'm going to that table. You're going to where there's an empty seat there. Right. Tia, did you not find a place? Where did you start? Yeah, there's a table, there's a chair here for you. Okay. And these 2 tables, you've only got 3 each, so just join and make a table of 6. Okay, and do you need me to tell you? Okay, the front table get up and join the back table. Front table get up, please, and go and join the back table. Won't you move, please? Yeah. Okay. These things require careful planning. I used to have dinners for all my heads of departments at UCT at my home. And we couldn't fit at one table, so we had 3 tables. And the first time we had such a dinner, the caterers or whatever, they put out the name tags and they thought, well, what do you normally do at a dinner? You put male, female around the table. So that male, female around all the tables. And then I wanted people to mix. So after the first course, I said, well, every odd person, every in-between person, get up and move to the next table. And what happened? Some tables were all male and the other tables were all female, because that's what happened. So you can't follow a simple pattern. You have to plot each person's movements so that you get. Okay, we've got it. Next thing, if you would find the document on your table and it's the document that is headed Collective Impact Framework. This is what we're going to be talking about now. There's one at each place. It's not the glossy document. It's the stapled printed document. It's a very helpful document. I wasn't sure if it was going to be presented, but I want you to go to number 4, which is page 6 of the document. So turn to page 6. Pages 1 to 5 is basically what you know. If you've been part of Siyaphumelela, then you know what's in pages 1 to 5. You understand the background, you understand the role of SADI, the backbone function, you understand how the organization has grown and what its core principles are. And so at item 4, which is on page 6, is the beginning of the section, which is the sort of new framework or the changes to the framework, or I don't know what the old framework looked like actually, but it's new. And that's all we're going to really look at. We're going to look at section 4. So you don't have to worry about the size of this document. From 5, 6, 7 is again going to be pretty much stuff you know. We're going to focus on 4. And hopefully you have read this. This was sent to you beforehand, but to make it manageable, we've got, what is it now? 50 minutes, I think we've got. Well, we actually lost quite a lot of time. It's 3 now. Okay, so we're going to go, originally you were going to have 25 minutes. I think you need 25 minutes. And we can't, I presume that the online presentation is at a fixed time. We can't run into that time, isn't it? Because someone's waiting to speak to us. Am I right? Who's coordinating the virtual presentation after the tea break? Right. So we can't, my point is we can't run into that. So we're running half an hour late at the moment. We're going to have to figure out how to. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Anyway, so now we're going to give you 25 minutes. That was the original amount of time scheduled. And it's 5 to 3, so that means it'll be 20 past 3 when we stop. Now, as you know, if I leave you to choose your own rapporteur, it'll take another 5 minutes. So I'm going to appoint the rapporteurs. Just look at me so that you know who I'm pointing to. You are the rapporteur for your group. You're the rapporteur in the striped shirt for your group. You're the rapporteur in the red scarf for your group. So you with the laptop, you're the rapporteur. And actually, you're the rapporteur for your group. Number 1 on that group, you're the rapporteur. Okay, put your hand up so I know you've seen me. Thank you. Please be the rapporteur for your group. And since I know Loretta's name, unfortunately, Loretta is the rapporteur for her group. Okay, rapporteur is German. But don't worry, the rapporteurs don't make this into a big deal thing. It's just to make a few notes. And when we do the feedback, you'll all contribute. But I just want someone to have responsibility for pulling together some of the points that come out. And then, in my experience, even though you're small groups, you still need someone to chair it, because otherwise the people who are quiet don't speak. And so I'm going to go to the other side. Francis, will you chair your group, please? Sir with the striped tracksuit pants, would you chair your group? Yes, please. The lady with those beautiful glasses, please chair your group. Will you with the green headdress please chair your group? You see, that's what happens when you stand out in a crowd. And then, sir, at the end of your table, will you chair your group? Lady in red top, please chair your group. And the person who's got her back to me and she's trying to avoid being singled out. The student, are you Zoe? I thought so. Zoe, will you please chair your group? Okay. So the job of the chair is to make sure that you don't spend the whole 25 minutes on 4.1. Okay. To move you through that framework, and there are There are four, it goes up to 4.10. So just make sure you don't spend more than, say, 5 minutes. Maybe some of you should start at the end. In fact, that's a good idea. We'll use 3 tables at the end here. Start at 4.10 and work backwards. 4.10, 4.9, 4.8. And if you get to 4.7, very good. And these tables go forward from 4.1 to towards 4.10. Okay. So we want you to reflect on this. Is it aligned? Are there big things missing? And there will be some important, you may have picked them up, I hope you have, but one of the key things that I picked up, which I think needs a bit more development than is here, so I'm going to plant it for you, is that there's a subtle, not so subtle shift from a focus on access and success, where success is measured by how many people successfully complete their degrees. And that's been the major thrust of Siyaphumelela's projects up to now, to an expansion of that to employment. So the impact in the future is not going to be measured only by how many people finish their degrees or their diplomas. It's going to be measured by how many people find work or get productively employed or start businesses or whatever. And so while you're thinking, when you're looking at this, that's a very significant shift. Think about what kinds of, what sorts of shifts would be required? How do programs change? How do you measure that? How do you create greater equity in those outcomes? Because that is very much a cross-institutional thing, not an intra-institutional thing. The success rates up to graduation are internal to the institution, but the employment success rates and employability are in a way beyond the institution, and they're measured. And think of yourself, if you are University X and the impact measure is ultimately going to also say to you, how come University Z is getting 80% of their graduates finding employment within 18 months of graduation, but University X is only getting 60% or 40%. So what is that going to mean in terms of the way that our programs, how we need to think about the programs and new projects? So before I send you off, Bill, do you want to, and Innocent, do you want to add anything? Because this is your show and you want to get what's out of this. Is there anything you want to add as guidance to the discussion? Sorry? Not a show. Sorry, wrong word. I mean, you're going to be held accountable, though, for what?
Of course, in addition to that, just the emphasis on sustaining the work.
Right.
That's a
Right.
Conversation. And they're going to find that in 4.10, that's where we're starting to talk about.
Right, very important. So sustaining has a number of dimensions. Of course, finances and resources are a huge dimension. Would this be sustainable if Kresge didn't continue to fund it? And presumably we would care about that. So how do we think about that sort of sustainability? But also, would it be sustainable if the current crop of DVCs and program leaders left? Is it sufficiently integrated into the way a university works to be sustainable? Will there be enough commitment to its continuing? So, okay, thanks for that. All right, let's have those discussions. You've got 25 minutes.
Oh, yes. I mean, So it's not that there's that I think most but I think and
It's it on speaker. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Stout, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
But yeah, now I can hear you. Let's we're just gonna try to increase the volume a bit. Yeah, now can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
All right, yeah, now I can hear you as well. So yeah, we're just checking that so the sound is not overlapping into the room, right? Yeah, so my apologies. I didn't know that you had actually joined from the beginning, and so
Yeah, Ashton sent me the link and told me to join at 7. It was 7:45 Eastern time. So I've been online.
okay,
I was not sure when I was supposed to be speaking, so but I'm ready
okay.
whenever you are.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so my apologies for that because we should have acknowledged you, but we'll introduce you anyway when the slot comes. So I just sent you by email. I was just flagging up that as you saw, we're running about 15 minutes behind time. So I wanted to check. So what would be the implications for you of if we delayed your remarks by 15 minutes?
Yes, I'm fine. I have another thing, but I think I can make it work. So what time do you think, how much longer before I'd be going on, Innocent? What do you think the timing would be?
So because now they just went into the conversation. Just hold on. I'm just looking. I just want to look at the program. So it's so your remarks were originally supposed to be 25 minutes from now. So that would potentially, I think, to avoid inconveniencing you, if you have another engagement that you need to meet, what we could do is at 15:45, we could still pause for you to share your remarks, and then the conversation will continue afterwards to make sure
Actually,
that we don't disturb you.
I'll rearrange things, Innocent, so that when they come back from the table talk, I guess I'll be the concluding presentation. I'm good with that. So that means I should be able to go on at around in about
At the
45
top of
minutes or
the hour.
so.
So your
At the top
original
of the hour.
slot was going to be in 25 minutes, but if we
Okay.
follow the program as we had planned, then your remarks would be at the top of the hour. That's
Okay.
40 minutes
Perfect.
from now. So will
I
that
can
work
make
for
that
you?
work. Yes, I can definitely make that work.
Okay, all right. All right, at the top of the hour, 40 minutes from now.
Yes. Yes. So I'll just
All
hang
right.
on since I'm already signed in and I'll be ready to go.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Wonderful. So the way we'll go then. So we'll when we get to that. So Bill will introduce you, and then you'll come online.
Okay.
All right.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So you saw the chair because we took it for granted. The rest of the people in the room know him. So Prof. Max Price, he is the ninth vice chancellor and principal of UCT. He is retired now, so he is the one chairing the meeting, and he was involved with Siyaphumelela from the beginning.
Great. Yes, I saw him. I've listened into his remarks, Bill's remarks.
Okay.
I saw the framework. I'll be eager to get a copy of that if you're able to send that after the convening. So I think
Okay.
I'm caught up.
All right. Yeah. I actually just emailed the framework to you. It should be in your inbox. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. I have your earlier email, but not the framework yet. So
Yeah, the
okay.
framework I emailed it to you about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, it should be coming through then.
Okay, wonderful. So, all right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Stout, and
Thanks,
apologies
Innocent.
once
No
again
problem.
for the glitch.
No
Okay.
problem. Thank you. See
Okay.
you soon.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
But it's not. When I got pretty early, it was help. And I feel like I'm spending a lot of time to join these. That's a bit like the. That's good. So they make it still time. And still a lot of things. And some of these as well, even if you're going to see it, they can be like, why I say right now, what are these things? We have next year. What is it? Or is that in and then at least that what if they think that was here what if
So the three minutes indeed. You know, you got to cut it. Okay. Can I get your collective attention again, please? So I'm sure you have this experience yourself when you ask people to work through and comment on documents. It will, in a short time available, all we can really do is stimulate some thinking, and maybe some thinking outside of our own. And I would like to ask you all, when you go home and this evening, before it's too distant in the future, to make a commitment to sending back to Sadie the 3 or 4 comments. If you can send more, but just to send back 3 or 4 thoughts or ideas that have been triggered, that are your responses to any particular aspect of the document, or section 4 as a whole. But particularly if you think you had an interesting idea that you don't think was captured, or you're not sure if it was captured, offer it. Or you think something is wording is wrong, or connotes the wrong message. And I'm asking you to do that in part so that you don't feel shortchanged in the short plenary that we have. We're not going to capture all your comments. So please add them, send them in after by tomorrow morning when we start the main conference. But now let's start and get some feedback, some ideas. And we're going to start with the table. I'm going to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to start with table 4 there. You are table 4, yeah. And just to reassure you that Ashton here in the green shirt is capturing your comments, your feedback. So the fact that I'm not writing on a flip chart here, you shouldn't think it's just going into the ether. It's all being captured. Okay. Right. Table 4. Share your thoughts with us, please.
Thank you, Chair. And let me just say that I'm the fortunate rapporteur of a delinquent group, because we only managed to get through 3 of these. But nevertheless, let me try to capture the essence of what the discussions were at the table. Maybe just a broad set of initial comments. I suppose people were thinking that the document in and of itself, at some level, was quite comprehensive, was quite broad. and that it opened up the opportunities for multiple institutional interpretations, given the varied context that our institutions find themselves in, different histories, and the different kind of places that we are at in terms of our evolution. That does mean that the document can sometimes read as slightly generic and will probably require a little bit more focus as it develops. And we started from 4.10 and moved backwards. So on the expanded funding to sustain student success, there were ideas around how it is that one thinks about levies for student success support to be institutionalized. In some ways, I think the discussion was really about how does one reconfigure institutional budgets internally to think through the funding of these programs. The reality is, of course, that not all universities can invest institutionally, and one has to accept that we have different levels of fiscal depth inside a sector that itself is not homogeneous. And so this does need to be taken into account. Interventions that require nominal additional investment include, of course, those things that are related to internal capacitation or cross-institutional collaborations of sorts. And so this was something to really perhaps think about more creatively. There was also a view that the major beneficiaries of our students, when we do think about student success, are really industry and enterprise. And that our relationships to industry and enterprise at this point around investment need to be enhanced somewhat more, partly because they are, in fact, the primary beneficiaries. Then there were views about the fact that even across the sector, there is an unevenness of the way that funding, the distributional regimes around funding are uneven themselves. And so one has to think through quite carefully how to manage funding on a needs basis across the sector in its entirety. Also, the idea of balancing funding and expertise. So not everything is dependent on resourcing from a monetary dimension, but actually one can start to think about sustaining student success through expertise and the sharing of expertise and institutionalizing that. On the monitoring and evaluation, research and learning, there was some talk at the table about the kind of idea of tracking and tracing studies of alumni. And that perhaps this was better done centrally through a sectoral entity or network to conduct the MEERL across the sector for comprehensive comparison. Most universities, in fact, have degraded alumni data over time. And so we think we've got good data, but actually that gets worse and worse each year. And so it's hard to actually track where it is that our students end up. Also, again, institutional capacitation on monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning is still required. And of course, again, to institutionalize this across all initiatives and to think about how one conducts cross-institutional collaborations again here. In other words, sharing of monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning expertise within and across institutions. Then on the institutional collaboration and public-private partnerships, in some ways, the first two that we covered already tackled some of this, but there were one or 2 points about institutional collaboration is often spoken about, but in fact, in reality, it's much more difficult to embed inside the sector, partly because this is not always seen as central to an institution's core business or to staff members' core workload. It's seen as additive rather than core. And so we have to be thinking about how one incentivizes this within and across institutions. And part of the difficulty is overcoming the sectoral competition, which of course is always a challenge because we work in a sector that has the competing demands of both cooperation and at the same time a degree of competition across the 26 institutions. So I think I've covered most of it, but...
Those are all very helpful. Thank you. Very nice and clear points. Thank you very much. Let's go to table 1 here.
Yes, thank you. So we managed 3 of the priorities. but hopefully we could have some extra time to engage. Otherwise, on the first one, on student access, that is equitable student access and success, we are in concert in terms of the points that have been advanced there. Except that for the strengthening of the pathways, we were thinking that this could be unpacked because there could be, or there are multiple ways of, extending the pathways, because currently the challenge for post-school education and training is, the availability of spaces and whether you need to extend the curriculum or you need to also review the policy on articulation across, the PSET system. That becomes very important. So that's with regards to the point on the pathways. But otherwise, we are also agreeing on, D and E in terms of the identification of the barriers and how, through policies and practices within institutions, we enable this to happen. So with 4.1, we are agreeing to most of the items as indicated there. And then on 4.2, with regards to the holistic approaches to student support, again, we are fine with those, except that we found some, overlap with 4.4. But the way we would rephrase number F is such that here it will be about, strengthening and developing the capabilities of the students and skills. That is for them to acquire those skills and we are saying to navigate in a changing world, because it's our understanding that in number 2, that's when they are still within the institutions. And when you go to 4.4, that's where then they've got to move beyond the institution. And that's where they will have to then demonstrate the competencies. And we are saying then you can move point F to 4.4, but then it should rather read supporting students to develop the competencies to thrive. Then it is about thriving in a changing world. That's why, that overlap between 4.2 and 4.4, which is on employability and, just beyond the institution there. And then the last one that we were still grappling with, and it still remains a big challenge for us. Perhaps someone can assist us in terms of just what our understanding of the student voice is, compared to what is currently, prevalent across institutions, which seems to reflect that when we talk of the student voice, it's about maybe representation in committees, this or that. But is that really the point of what we want to achieve when we talk about the student voice and participation? And that is why we are, proposing, just unpacking that in such a way that even when we talk about student-centeredness, what are we talking about? Is it about, burdening the student with what is actually supposed to be happening there and what they are supposed to be, achieving? Or what is it when we say, the student voice must be heard there? Also the question of whether we could engage in partnerships with students where, of course, their voice could also form part of the, be they plans or just the design discussions of the programs that they are being exposed to. But that's how far we could go. And the
Great. Thank you. Anyone else from the table want to at a point. But I think that your point about the document needing maybe, and there may be a narrative that will accompany it or expand it, quite what one means by student-centeredness. In a way, we probably all think that most of the time we are student-centered. That is, after all, the reason that universities exist. But what is the problem that we're trying to fix here? And I think that the comments on the student voice, not to understand that it's not just about the student representatives, but I think the document does suggest things like focus group discussions, other ways of student feedback that get to the students who are at the coalface and understanding their sense of the culture of the place. Yeah.
Make one point on that.
Sure.
So I think fundamentally what is lacking here for me is we talk about the student voice participation, and there are all these methods of getting student voice. And I think where we need to go be more aggressive. If this is institutions committing to things, it's got to be about how we use that data, so that it is not just archives of data that we collect, but they are actually catalysts for change. And I think that is what's missing from the institutional commitment here.
Right. Thank you very much for that point. Okay. I'm going to ask the last table there, tables 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I didn't realize you were only 4, but never mind. That must have led to must have led to a good discussion.
Yeah, it didn't actually.
Well, we'll be the judges of that, shall we? Yeah.
Okay, we started with number 10.
Great.
We have someone at the table from the Advancement Office at UCT, and they have
I wouldn't trust them.
they have themes on which they raise funds. So, for example, student bursaries, student wraparound programs, and so on. And if one could then use the advancement offices to help to raise funds for student success, it would be great. Then we agree with recommendation 3 on the different types of stakeholders that we need to engage with in order to try and raise funds. It's not as easy in rural areas because there aren't the number of businesses and private sector people in the communities there. The government funding, the UCDPs mentioned, but we thought that adding the CETAs, which we hear might soon be restructured, what they do at the moment is some of the CETAs offer internships at universities, which are then sort of shared out from HR. It's a way of improving employability, but not necessarily for your students. They bring students in from the sector, but they're already interested in employability. So one could really consider working with the CETAs more. Then 4.9, several of us at the table have worked in the past with the UCDG and with CREST and its logic model. And they drummed it into the universities. We sat session after session over about a year, learning how to work that logic model. And so using a logic model for monitoring and evaluation seemed to us a bit of a no-brainer to use a CREST model because we're not starting from zero. And also making sure that in measuring impact, that we ask the beneficiaries, that we do have student surveys, say, for example, graduate surveys. And also, we're interested in graduate destination surveys if they don't already exist at the universities, so that we can see who's employed within 12 months in their field, preferably, and who's employed within 6 months, 12 months. The international agencies, rating agencies, normally use a year. A university I worked at used 6 months. 4.8, we thought we should extend student mobility between institutions to promote employability. And that's not only within South African institutions, but also to have partnerships with international institutions for our students. Then in terms of the barriers, we can name a very, very long list, from residences to health, family responsibility, child-headed households, food security. And people we can work with and do work with are NGOs, municipalities, landlords, because the universities just don't have enough residence places. Supermarkets, they're quite happy to use their sell-by-date foods to donate to like community engagement officers to increase food security. Food gardens, which several universities have actually started on their premises, and clothing stores. Many students go out to Will or to interviews and they don't have appropriate clothing. So if one could work with all these people as partners, it would be useful. But again, some of the rural universities don't have access to all of these facilities. We looked at 4.7, and to us, the major thing to emphasize there is the lack of ownership at universities of student success. It needs to be in the strategic plan as a goal. The goals need to be filtered through the university through a performance management system. People must be held accountable, all the way then reporting all the way to the VC to council. The council must hold the executive accountable. If this doesn't happen, there's going to be no proper ownership. And then we talked about reviewing curricula and how lecturers are being asked to do too much. They're working and working and working. And I've seen this myself. They knock their heads against a brick wall. They add and they add and they change, and they're not getting the right help. So they need data, and they need curriculum analyst specialists, and they need LMS specialists to work with them. And we've had enormous success into the double figures after that in improving modules results. So those are some of the ideas. We were starting to have a look at the others, but that's as far as we got.
That's brilliant. Where did the curriculum reform, was that under 4.7?
4.7, yes.
The curriculum issues. So just to capture that, your point there is that lecturers must be offered support by curriculum experts,
yes,
to review and change their curricula.
Yeah.
And the reason to change them is because because the current curricula are barriers to success?
Could be barriers to success, yes. But the argument was they're so busy, how can they get involved in student success as well beyond the classroom? But if you help them with a team, particularly with modules at risk, then they can get involved without it being too onerous for them.
Right. Okay. Thanks, team. That's great. Table 7. Let's go to table 3 here. Yeah. Were you repeating up? Okay. It's the microphone. No, here. This one. Thanks.
Hi. So we looked at the first 3 because we got talking about everything. So it kind of slots into many of the others. But looking at the first one, equitable student access and success, we said there's a big gap because this one starts talking about when the students are already at university. So, what about addressing issues before they even get to universities? A lot of the universities also have feeder schools, and they actually have the catchment schools that they focus on. And what about the other schools that don't have the support from the university? So how can we support students that want to go to university? So it's not all your students that need the support. It's just students who want to go to university. And the major challenges we looked at students coming in is the language challenges, literacy, numeracy, and also now looking at computer literacy as well. For the first point. The second point we looked at, I'm not going to repeat what other groups have been saying, but holistic approaches to student support. We thought I mean, many of these bullets talk to supporting students, but if we're looking at holistic support, we have to support the academics and we have to support the curriculum. So holistic student support means supporting the lecturers and the curriculum, which is actually missing out from 4.2. 4.3, we also had a lot of discussion on 4.3, and we thought when they say student voice, as soon as we say student voice, it's student feedback, and there you got the voice of the students. But we feel like it's partnership, like the first table mentioned. Student partnership becomes more important than student voice. How do we partner with them in order to improve student success? We spoke about that. Then we also spoke about employability. And if we're looking at employability, the quality and type of jobs. A student could graduate as a lawyer and then work as a cashier. Do we count that as employed? The student is employed. So the type and quality of jobs that student gets as well is important. Then we spoke about career advising. When does career advising take place? If you look at 4.4, it kind of goes in there. When do we offer career advising? It's very important. Most of the time, it's when the student already registers for a program and then we start to advise them. And then they drop out and join another program, and one term is gone, and then they're failing. So when do we offer career advising to students? And we spoke about fit for purpose programs as well. Was there anything else that I left out?
I was a fly on the wall in your group.
Yes, yeah.
And I thought there was a really interesting discussion about, at least at some institutions, lecturers, the standards of passing may have dropped under the pressure to get students through, under throughput pressures, or because students, for all sorts of reasons, students' learning styles may lead to poor learning, and then we adapt our exam systems and our expectations, and we're down. And it seems to me that links so that the measure of throughput of success to the end of the degree needs somehow, we need to introduce some sort of quality assurance or quality standard to be sure that it's a meaningful graduation point. And that links to the employability. And I want to suggest I didn't contribute in the group, so I'm making this point not on behalf of the group, but separately that one area of data collection which may help inform this is to understand why the employment rates differ across institutions with their graduates, but also across fields of study. And to see, because we may find, for example, that in a discipline like accounting, where there's a national exam, and everyone has to pass the exam regardless of which university you come from, it would be interesting to see what the employment rates are of the students from the different institutions who have all passed the same exam, and whether that differs from the employment rates from other faculties where they haven't had to do a national standardized exam. It's one way of thinking about the problem. Another may be to talk to employers about their experience of graduates from different universities, and because they may already have made that choice, but it may be made on good information or poor information. We were also told that where you have work-study program, where you have integrated study, particularly the universities of technology, they do get feedback from the companies that they partner with, their students, and it's often feedback that's hard to hear because they're telling you how unprepared your students are. Well, what do we do? Do we really have systems that are responding appropriately to that? And that may be a major area for intervention. And it may be curriculum support and change, or it may be figuring out some more fundamental questions. At least at the universities that are not universities of technology, there's a serious debate about whether we are preparing people for the workplace or not, whether that is our job. And I think there are different views. And one of the discussions that Siyaphumelela should be facilitating is to get some agreement or understand what the diversity is. Many of us think that any degree is a basic foundation degree and that you learn what you need to know for work afterwards, not at university. Whereas there are clearly some degrees where you have to learn at university, and employers may have different expectations. So that was, I thought, a really interesting discussion that happened in that group. Okay, now I want us to break, but so I'm going to invite the remaining tables only to make 1 point each, and we'll collect the rest of your comments because our speaker based in America is going to talk to us at a few minutes past 4, and I just want to give you time to get coffee. So the two table I didn't get feedback from your table, am I right? Won't you give us what you think is the seminal point? Because we've already had feedback on 1, 2, and 3 from others.
Well, I think the conversation structured around this notion of collaboration for scaled change and impact, right? So how do you do that? We were lucky we had a colleague from Detroit and Kresge, which we could talk a little bit too about. How do you create that co-opetition model that allows institutions to share enough so a larger goal can be achieved? And I think the key thing around that is how do we leverage then that there's already in all the work that we've done, we've created specialized expertise in the system, how that's then shared effectively in a way that helps institutions at different levels to improve.
Right.
That's sort of the best I can do. So,
okay. Thank you, Will. As I say, and you've got someone at your table who will have captured that discussion as well. Table 5, yeah. Can we get a microphone quickly to there?
Hoof. Thank you very much. So a lot was said. I think the colleagues will probably send in written submissions because I can only make 1 point. But what we can all agree on is that the value proposition of Siyaphumelela remains intact and is very strong. And the reason why I say that I want to back this up by something that we discussed just now before we started, to say that I said to colleagues here that many of you guys here in the room understand student success from a position of, when a doctor understands cancer, not from a patient's perspective. When I tell you that my pain is on my left, you understand it based on your medical expertise, but you don't understand what I am telling you I'm feeling. So that's what student success is to me. And this is because most of you, again, you studied during a time where academic success was equal to student success, which is not true today. And I said to colleagues, I was lucky when I started out at university in 2019. I came at a time where Siyaphumelela programs were already up and running. And I say this because I was a beneficiary. For instance, I said, I don't know where the money came from, number one, to fund the things that the university offered me. I got to study ELH, which prepared me to speak the English that they spoke at university. The following year, I became a tutor, tutoring people like me the previous year. The next year, I became a tutor rep, meaning that I was now engaging with lecturers in terms of what the needs of the students are and what we are tutoring, and if we are tutoring the right things. The following year, I became a facilitator, and all of these programs were being run by the CTL of the same module that I did in my first year. I then went on, just to cut the story short, to say that I then went on and got employed by the CTL. My qualification is in education. And the skills that I had been receiving from being a tutor rep, facilitator, are skills I would have otherwise been denied if the focus was on throughput. If I came, graduated, and left, I would have gone to join the scores of other teachers who thought the only possibility for my degree was to become a teacher. And I've never been one for that matter, despite my qualification being in education, because on that final year as a facilitator, I got the skills that were necessary for me to become an educational technologist. And from that role, I went on to, even though now I'm no longer with the UFS, but it is because of those chances that were taken on me, those opportunities to develop time management, resource management, how to deal with people, how to negotiate, that eventually got me where I am. And so I view student success holistically in a way of saying that if we could track where the people we help go, we could see how impactful the work that we do is. Because this weekend, when I was doing school visits, even though I wasn't going to talk about it today, I met one of the students I tutored as a tutor myself at that time. He's now a teacher in the same area I was visiting schools in. And he said to me, the module you were tutoring me was very difficult. I thought I wasn't going to make it. But it was people like you who made this possible for me. He was showing me his car because at that time he now had a car. He fortunately went on to become a teacher, which is what he studied for. And I went on to become an educational technologist, which is not a teacher, but still in education. Do we not view that as success? Or is success only success when I get, because I've never been, your dean's medal student. I've been an average student throughout my university years. But the side skills that were given to me have enabled me to view life differently. They've enabled me to go back to schools even to say, look, there's a better world there. Because the university experience I got was more than just academics. So that is the long and short of it. Thank you.
Thanks for that input. So really what you've adding to the previous groups on is this idea that we have to ensure that our definition and measures of student success are much more nuanced than simply graduating or graduating with a particular mark or graduating in a certain amount of time, and that it picks up all those other skills, social capital and others. Yeah, thank you. And then group table 6, this table, if we can just have the mic here.
Thank you. We probably the most important point that came from our conversation is that around funding, but in a way merged with collaboration. We talked about the fact that the funding horizon is changing, that there are a couple of threats when it comes to funding in a South African context, and the possibility that in particular US funders may not in the future be able to invest in South Africa. And so we then talk about, well, funding for what? Because if funding is withdrawn from the network, universities may be able to continue doing their student success work through, for example, the UCDP grant. But what we really need funding for is for the network. And that led us to a brief conversation around the value of the network, the way in which, even though we all have different institutional context, we all have lessons learned that we can share. And so the value of the Siyaphumelela network is really in its systemic approach to student success. And so therefore, we thought that as we think about funders, especially private funders or other foundations, that we think about funding for the network as well, and to ensure that we continue with a more systemic approach to student success.
Brilliant. That puts the burden fairly and squarely on Innocent, I think, doesn't it? Okay. Thanks to all of you. I'm sorry that we didn't get all of the points, but I want to let you know that Dr. Karen Stout, who is going to speak to us, has been online the whole time. She's heard all of your feedback too, and I thought it was good for her to be part of it and to hear the groups. Welcome, Dr. Stout. We're going to take really a 5-minute break. It's time for you to get your coffee and bring it back in if you need it. And then Bill is going to introduce our speaker. So please get your coffee. Please take your seats. We have a very patient Dr. Stout who has been waiting for us. And this is going to be the highlight of the afternoon. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to shortchange her time. Please come and sit down. Bill, over to you.
Thank you, Max. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Karen Stout, President and CEO of Achieving the Dream. I know many of you, probably the majority of you in this room, have attended Dream at some point or another over the last 10 or 15 years. And before Karen joined Dream as president in 2015, she served as president of Montgomery Montgomery College in Pennsylvania. There's also Montgomery County, Maryland, so it can get confusing. But she was president of Montgomery College in Pennsylvania. She's really specialized in whole college transformation and equity and mobility. But I think for me, what's been most important about Karen is she took a fledgling organization that had actually been not even a single organization until just a couple of months before she joined. It was sort of an amalgamation of different groups working together. And she took it and really professionalized it, grew it, attracted the attention of the top philanthropies in the United States, the Gates Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, Mackenzie Scott. So she's really managed to strengthen the organization and make it really a part of the education establishment, but for reform. And so I think at this point, there are about 300 or 400 community colleges in the network. And she really has set the standard for this whole movement to improve student success. And when we talk about in our world here in South Africa, we talk about the mothers who created Siyaphumelela. We typically talk about Ntabiseng Ugude, Cheryl DeLoray, and I think Karen Stout should be added to that group as well. And in fact, she's been a particularly strong supporter of our work in the United States. She's funded in our own backyard, Wayne County Community College, or she's worked with Wayne County Community College as an ATD school, community colleges in reservations in the United States, which we've also supported at times, and the State Center Community College District in Fresno, California, where we have a lot of investments at Kresge through our place-based work. But she's also been a real champion of South Africa and how she can support all of you in your work here in South Africa when you come to the United States to make sure that you're able to learn and grow as much as possible. And so she's really been an amazing ally and colleague for us. I'd add one other thing, fun fact, she's an amazing athlete. She's competed internationally in field hockey in the UK. And I think she lettered in, was it like 500 sports, or maybe it was 5 sports, but she was in high school. So she is an amazing athlete. You do not want to wrestle with her, run with her, pitch a ball at her, unless you want to get really smashed down. But she is an amazing, amazing colleague. And with that, I welcome Karen to start. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill. It is an honor to be with you today. I only wish it could be in person. I recognized many of you while I listened in and heard your voices, saw some of your faces. Zoe, thank you for being in the room and continuing to inspire all of us like you did at Dream. Bill, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm actually, in August, I'll be in Antwerp playing in the Masters World Cup field hockey competition representing the United States. I would have been at the World Cup, Masters World Cup in South Africa in 2022. I made the team then too, but I ruptured my Achilles tendon during a practice session. So I'm looking forward to getting back out on the pitch. I want to congratulate Innocent and the Sadie leadership for establishing this leadership forum and having this opportunity for conversation. And I hope my remarks inspire your work and your planning. I think this type of cross-functional group is exactly what is required to move from collaboration to tighter alignment of the outcomes of what I think is a stellar South African post-secondary ecosystem, and to help to align the goals of your individual institutions with the broader goals of the community and the country. And many of the issues that you reported out on, I have a running list, are parallel to the issues that our leaders in the United States are articulating. So there's a lot of crosswalk for our work. As I was reflecting on my comments for today, I realized that my work with Achieving the Dream has defined my career and much of my leadership journey. As Bill mentioned, I was president of Montgomery County Community College, and we joined the Achieving the Dream network in 2006 when ATD was just an initiative with 7 founding partners, and no one really knew what it would be or become or whether it would stay or was a fad. But I can tell you that it defined my leadership approach at Montgomery. My college earned Leah Alston status, the prestigious award from ATD for our student outcomes in 2014. And then in 2015, I became president of ATD. And these remarks and my remarks tomorrow in the keynote are bittersweet because they are my last quote unquote public comments as ATD's president and CEO. So many of you know that I am stepping down from this position on June 30th and not quite sure what will come next, but you will rest assured you will continue to see me at Dream, and I hope to continue to have a voice and a role in the student success movement as it moves forward. I leave Achieving the Dream strong and sustainable, and the influence of our work is making tremendous impact. So I've titled my remarks today From Initiative to Movement, hoping that you can learn from our model and results, how we're thinking about the future, 5 lessons that I think resonate with the Leadership Forum and your upcoming work and the framework that you discussed today. And then I'll leave you with a couple of questions for the future. So ATD was founded in 2004. We're 10 years older than Sadie, and our work now reaches colleges in 48 states, plus here in South Africa as we partner with Sadie, and even to New Zealand as we partner with their Department of Education. And we've evolved over time with changes in our environment, just as Sadie has and as Bill articulated at the beginning of this convening. And we've really evolved based on the needs of our individual colleges, what we're learning from that embedded approach we have with our colleges, and then what we're seeing in the external environment and the ecosystem within which we sit. Our unit of change for most of our 20 years plus has been at the institutional level. But you will see in this presentation that we're beginning to raise our gaze to broader opportunities for impact. And that gaze is necessary to build the pathways into and through our colleges for more students, those pathways that you've talked about increasing today in your conversation. So with these changes, this is what I hope to do today. With these changes, there are some enduring parts of our approach in matching supports to college journeys. So essentially, there's one point of entry into our network, and that requires a full commitment by leaders at all levels, presidents, governing boards, leadership teams, to a 3-year Foundations of Transformation experience that is facilitated by coaches. And I think you know our coaching model and have adopted parts of that coaching model in South Africa. And the goal is that colleges come in and they build a work plan to address the gaps in student progress and completion. But we know that that first 3 years is just the start, that it takes 5 to 7 years to really begin to move the needle on student completion and beyond. And so once colleges leave that 3-year experience, we try to move them into customized engagements with ATD that could include coaching, also can include cohorted learning opportunities around a number of innovation initiatives that I'll speak to in a moment. They can secure Leader College status, Leader College of Distinction status, Leah Meyer Alston status, and they attend a number of events like DREAM and the upcoming Data Summit at reduced network prices. And our business model has evolved, even though this approach has essentially pretty much remained the same. And I'll also touch on that because I know from the comments earlier, sustainability for Sadie is top of mind. We know our approach is unique. We've done a lot of surveying of colleges inside ATD and outside of ATD, colleges that I now call ATD curious, because though our work in some way or another has reached almost 500 community colleges across the country, the other 500 that we haven't reached yet with a specific intervention, they know about ATD, they follow us, they follow the work. I call them ATD curious. So we're known for our focus on data, the peer learning approach, the fact that we do localized work, but we inform it with national research, and then lots of supports for leadership and the team-based approach that we take. And of course, coaching is our big differentiator, and that is embedded in the Foundations of Transformation experience. We are making impact, and we're proud of that impact. Our colleges typically start with lower graduation rates than non-ATD colleges, but after 5 to 7 years, the completion rates are increasing at an accelerated rate than non-ATD colleges. And most importantly, network colleges are narrowing equity gaps, in many cases closing equity gaps across racial and ethnic categories and by gender and other student populations such as first generation students, veterans, student parents, etc. And we've learned, and we have the data to show, that the longer that a college stays in the network, the more steep their completion rates. So this is a long investment and a long game, which is why it's important that Sadie remains sustainable as kind of the infrastructure to provide the supports to help the colleges have gains like this. So we don't prescribe how colleges should move forward with their action plans, and many of you have seen this slide before. There is an architecture of success that we see in our colleges, our highest performing colleges. do these 5 things, and there's a lot underneath of this that I could speak to, but I'm not going to today for the sake of time. But there are a couple things that I do want to draw your attention to. The North Star, which I'll allude to soon, the strong fundamentals, which this is the capacity framework that Achieving the Dream used for since 2015 to 2024. We've unveiled a new one. I think Sadie has taken the capacity framework and created one that's very similar for South African universities. The point being that if you don't build the capacities, the infrastructure for change, you can't move forward change, and that it requires a look across many dimensions. And these are the dimensions for the previous decade. But despite the work, the improvement in outcomes, completion primarily, the reduction in equity gaps, the strengthening of infrastructure within our colleges, we know we have to do more. This slide, it reminds me, Innocent, I think you put a slide like this up at the beginning of the session this morning. Almost the same slide, just a different country. So we still have work to do, and the student success agenda continues to evolve. This is ATD's depiction of the evolving student success agenda. Our colleges sit in this evolving framework in a lot of different places. Very few of them are all the way in that community vibrancy part of the framework, but you can see that we've moved past completion and credential attainment to translating what that means for student and family return on education, not return on investment, but return on education. And then what does that mean for the community within which the college sits, for how thriving, prosperous the community is? Underneath of all of that is access, and it is a new definition of access, not the definition of access that was the access definition that started the community college movement in the United States in the early 1950s, but a definition of access that's multidimensional, that requires us to ask new questions about who's missing from our campuses, who's benefiting from what we provide on our campuses, and then asking that question all the way through the student journey, including into programs and including into the workforce, and including looking at big measures like mobility. So the 2 questions is, where are Siyaphumelela colleges on this arc? What is the South African arc of the student success movement? Borrowing this, using it as you think about the next steps for Sadie, I think could be a useful tool. And then where is South Africa on this journey? So a few years ago, when ATD was looking at the more to do part of our work in our new strategic plan, or our recently renewed strategic plan, we conceived the notion that community colleges need to become hubs for economic mobility and thus community vibrancy. So our logic model rests on insisting that colleges understand their local communities and opportunity in new ways. And if they do that, they will ensure access to affordable post-secondary education for traditionally disconnected populations. And if they establish early momentum and ensure timely completion for all student groups, it's in that part of the logic model that most of our work over the first 20 years of ATD sits. Then we will contribute to the economic mobility and social mobility for individuals and families, and as a result, create vibrant communities. We translated that theory of change into this community vibrancy framework. We built this and tested it with 15 colleges in 2023 and 2024, and we're working now to contextualize it with our tribal colleges, because this does not look the same in a tribal college context. Much of the work inside our movement has been in the inside out part, whole college transformation, looking at early momentum and milestone momentum. Most of the sessions, I think, at Dream over the last several years have been in that part of the framework. But the next generation of our work is going to require us to combine outside in approaches with inside out approaches. So mobility, not completion, is the new end game, with the assumption that mobility will lead to societal gains that create a vibrant community. When I was listening in, I heard a very important and relevant conversation about how to define success around wage gain, around social mobility, your own individual stories that inform this. So the definition of mobility in the United States, there's a number of definitions. It's not really clear exactly which one our movement will land on, but it's important that we do land on one, just like we landed on one for completion and early momentum. Just as fundamentals or capacities drove excellent outcomes in the first generation of the student success work, we believe fundamentals are going to be important going forward, but they're different and the goals are different. So new to the wheel are capacities in community connectedness. What is your proficiency as a college or university in building what I call boundary spanning partnerships? How agile are your systems, including the systems that you use to translate student voice into student partnership? I loved that reflection earlier, and I'm going to begin using that because it's not enough to have student voice. And then what types of data do we need to really move forward the change that we're seeking? This is the new metrics framework. You'll see we're collecting a lot on the left side of the framework. It's on the right side in mobility and return on investment, where in the United States, we're trying to build data systems that get to workforce outcomes, employment and earnings, economic mobility, and ROI. How much time does it take a student to recoup the net cost of their investment? Especially important as the academy is more under attack around value. We also are thinking about the community vibrancy metrics. This is the most underdeveloped part of our framework, and I'm hoping you'll take this framework and think about it within a South African context. But we think there are 5 metrics in this community vibrancy area for us to play with. And more specifically, here are what some of those may look like. And some of our colleges are beginning to set goals around societal gains and designing back. So if a societal gain is to improve the educational going rate of the community within which they are located, they're setting that as a target and they're working back. And that means something for the way that they design their programs. The same with unemployment rate, which is not one here, but that is another societal gain that many of our colleges are working backwards from. This is a complicated slide, but the point of this slide is to show you that we are organizing all of our fundraising and innovation around building out the framework. So in addition to serving as a network for transformation, we serve as an intermediary for innovation for our network colleges as a sort of a test bed. So in this first slide, areas of innovation that we are currently engaged in that connect to the framework include scaling supports for student parents, helping colleges to scale shortened terms, helping colleges to diversify nursing pathways. We have a bottleneck in the number of students who want to be nurses at our community colleges and the number of slots for those nurses. But there's a whole health careers field that students can become employed in and have the same kind of mobility and wage gain that they can get from a nursing degree. It gets to that point made earlier in the report out about when do we begin to do career planning with students. It can't be on the back end of their experience, especially if they're sitting waiting for a slot in a program. It has to be even before the front end, but at least on the front end, and then all the way through their time with us. There are more investments on this slide. The framework has resonated with funders. And when you talk about sustainability, what we try to do is build innovation opportunities for our colleges to continue to do the work that's core to advancing the framework, and at the same time pull learning out of those grant investments so that we can spread the learning inside ATD and across ATD. But a couple of those additional investments are dual enrollment into strategic enrollment marketing, digital holistic student supports, advancing K through college transitions for students with learning differences. So as you think about your work as a leadership forum, I'd like to suggest 5 lessons in leadership that might drive the design of your work together. I did not see the framework before preparing these remarks. I hope some of these intersect with some of the pieces of the framework. My sense is that some of them do. But let me go into each one quickly. So student success happens in systems that have a shared vision. And our colleges inside the colleges, without looking at partners, and I think it was Francois who talked about co-opetition, are pretty good at getting to that shared vision and then scaling student success practices. And that's been a big leap for all of us because, as Bill said at the very beginning of today, we tended to do boutique programs that were disconnected from one another that could not be scaled. Sadie, we've moved past that. Achieving the Dream has moved past that. And to scale inside a college requires that clear North Star with clear and specific milestones set and monitored along the way. So I think really thinking about what is your unit of change as a leadership forum. For this group, supporting the colleges in gaining scale is important because that work's not done. We need to go deeper. And Innocent talked about that at the beginning. But you also, I think, need to go wider. A wider connection that connects the ecosystem of post-secondary opportunity and success in South Africa with larger goals. So then what is the shared vision? And then what are the priorities? And that begins, I think, to establish some common ground around co-opetition, that you can compete and collaborate at the same time. And there are some interesting models emerging from our ATD colleges around that kind of model, where colleges are beginning to form regional groups and shared services, or where colleges are working with community-based organizations and others on a collective impact model. I'll talk in a moment about the implications of that on the design of our colleges. The second is that collaboration is not enough, and this builds on the shared vision idea, but goes a little bit deeper. Many of our colleges confuse collaboration with alignment. They're not the same. And this gets especially complicated in the community vibrancy framework, which requires alignment across multiple entities to really catalyze community vibrancy. And your presence here is a sign of collaboration. And I suggest that this group think through this question as you move forward. What would we all need to improve student success at scale? With scale being either regional, defined regionally, defined country, defined across sectors, defined within your respective sectors. I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about this type of alignment in new ways. And I think the leadership forum structure will help you to do that. Building capacity matters. And the key question for me is, what capacities must this ecosystem of partners create to be successful? You've talked about the sustainability of Sadie being part of that capacity framework. You talked about the sustainability of leadership being almost as important as having a funding model that supports sustainability. You talked about building capacity for strategic reallocation, which is really the only way we're going to move forward in this time of deep constraints. You talked about building capacity to convene so that you can build alignment around shared models. So this is a really interesting question. What would your capacity wheel look like for the leadership forum? What capacities do you need to develop across the ecosystem so all of us are leadership rich and capacity deep? The fourth is equity is a design question. It's forcing in the United States because equity has become weaponized to ask questions that still get to the equity question. Who is missing and who is benefiting? Those are really key questions. And the mindset that our results, our inequitable results, are not caused by student deficits, but by institutional design deficits, by system design deficits. Just think about the conversation earlier on credit mobility. That's a system deficit. That's not a student deficit. So what are we asking students to navigate that we could redesign? As we look at post-completion outcomes, are we also asking the questions about who is missing and who is benefiting? And then, specific to this convening, is there anybody that should be at the table that's not at the table? I'm glad students are at the table. Employers, community-based organizations, there are a lot of entities that could be at the table moving forward. And then the last lesson, stay focused on outcomes, but think bigger about impact. And this really is kind of asking you to take the community vibrancy framework, adapt it in the South African context, and figure out what that means for economic mobility, social mobility, community well-being, and national development, and how your collective work aligns and supports. And I have one bonus lesson, and this is about data. Data does not change institutions. I think one of the participants reflected on it's really how we use the data. When ATD started, we thought that if we just could show the data, change would come. But we've learned over the years that data informs change. Culture produces change. I often speak to the need for us to democratize the data, to help our colleges move with more agility, to break down bottlenecks that keep students from reaching their goals. But in doing this, I realize that I'm missing the goal of the goal. Democratizing data is one move we must make in our colleges to democratize the change, which is really the goal of the goal. And that may be the biggest single lesson for higher education. Too much of our change management processes and structure, even if we have one, remains centralized. Too few people feel ownership. Successful colleges build systems where change becomes everyone's responsibility, and it is a core part of their way of being. They don't change manage every initiative. They have an organization that is about change. They always build urgency. They create cross-functional teams. They develop leadership at every level. They look at transformation not as a technical problem, but as a human problem. So I end with the community vibrancy framework and the challenge for the leadership forum to think through these 5 lessons with the bonus lesson within the context of your framework for change. And I want to leave you with a couple of questions for the stakeholder groups in the room. So for the university leaders, what outcomes beyond graduation should universities be accountable for? How do universities contribute to community prosperity? How do you support articulation across the broader ecosystem? For TVET leaders, how can workforce preparation become a platform for broader community development? What outcomes matter beyond placement? And what is your potential as a driver for building an integrated system and strategy for skills, employment, and social mobility in South Africa? For government, how do we align funding, accountability, and outcomes around community well-being? What measures would indicate a thriving community? And for Sadie, how can evidence move more rapidly into practice? How can we accelerate the cycle between innovation and adoption? And what continuing supports do our colleges need to build capacity? I'll just end with a passage from Michelle Obama's remarks at last week's opening of the Obama Presidential Center. She said, "We simply don't have the luxury of time or to be cynical or complacent. Hope is the essential spark that lights the fire of change." And as I think about the next generation of our work in South Africa and in the United States, the one thing that I think is imperative is for us to compress the time between what we know and what we do. Because the longer it takes for us to do that, the more students we leave behind and the less thriving our communities are. I just want to thank you again for having me today. I look forward to tomorrow. And I have so enjoyed my work with you over the last 11 years and hope that we find ways to continue to work together in the future. And with that, Innocent, I'll turn it back to you.
I wasn't sure, Karen, who was going to thank you, but they're all looking at me. So
thank you.
I do want to thank you. And I'm going to just ask if anyone would like to ask a question before we lose the connection with Karen. She will be speaking at the conference, as you heard, tomorrow. So there'll be other opportunities, but I'm not sure if you'll all be here for that. Does anyone want to ask anything or make a comment? Yeah, thanks. Let's get the mic to you. I hope, Karen, tell me if it turns out that you can't hear the question, but let's try.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So how does this relate? So when we talk about community well-being, if Karen could just please elaborate just briefly on how it links to broader ideas around super cities, knowledge towns, for example.
Okay.
It's a good question. The way that the community colleges have situated community vibrancy is a little bit different than the super city, super town, except within the context of how community colleges can develop the talent pipeline necessary for the workforce in that community to thrive. So the community colleges that are doing the best work are working very collaboratively with employers, not just to find out the current labor market needs, but to prospect about the future. Employers are, and I heard this earlier in the conversation, employers in the United States are being asked to put what I'd call skin in the game, that if new programs are required, and the community colleges cannot stand those programs up, that there would be investments, deep investments, sustainable investments in the infrastructure of the colleges and in the students themselves, including guarantees for internships and employment on the back end of an experience. So that starts to get at that idea of building that knowledge community. There's other examples where the Alamo district in Texas set as their community vibrancy goal to eliminate poverty in their community. That's a big moonshot, as their chancellor speaks about. But in doing that, they were able to rally community partners and employers from all sectors. And they've created a very strong collective impact model that is beginning to really work toward eradicating poverty collectively. So you see a lot of joint partnerships between the Alamo colleges and community-based organizations. You see a lot of proximate work where the college is moving very strategically into low-income neighborhoods, not just clearly poverty-impacted neighborhoods, but neighborhoods where families aren't earning a living wage. And a lot of the conversation in the United States is that community colleges should not graduate students into poverty. So there's a lot of work that's being done inside the colleges around the program mix to understand what the wage gain and employability is for programs, and that if there's not high employability and not wage gain, some of those programs are being modified. And in fact, some of them are being cut. And maybe being offered by other providers, but not the community college, so that they're an entryway into a collegiate program. I don't know if that gets at the question, but those are a couple of examples.
Thank you very much. We're getting close to 5 when we said we would end. So, oh no, I can take one more question if anyone would like to. If there's one more. Yes, Professor Peterson.
Thank you, Karen. It's Francis Peterson here. Maybe just 2 comments, well, one comment and a question. When you talk about collaboration more than collaboration is not enough, I think the understanding of collective impact is probably not always understood the same. And it might be useful to just, you said that there is a collective impact model in one particular area that you mentioned. But I think it's important that when we understand collective impact, that the whole idea of co-creation and reduce duplication is not just intensifying specific initiatives. And probably just a comment from you on that specifically. And then on the other one is around student debt, where we say we don't want to graduate students into poverty. I think in the States is obviously a big issue. Here in South Africa, it's also a big issue. And how do we look at that from a collective perspective? Thank you.
Those are big questions to end with. I think, a lot of at least in the United States, a lot of the thinking on collective impact is being tested. And certainly this community vibrancy framework tests it for ATD. We're trying to not move beyond collective impact, but think differently about what the result is. Co-creation, yes. Reduce duplication, yes. But I'm thinking more about abundance, building collective impact that's not addressing issues within the context of scarcity, but rather within the context of abundance. And that's where co-creation around what's possible, I think, moves us beyond some of the more traditional collective impact models. It does require us to think about our seat at the table in a lot of our community partnerships, how we're going to prioritize that seat, and whether we as college leaders have the capacity to be the backbone in some of those partnerships. My experience as a community college president is that very rarely were we the leader in any of those boundary spanning partnerships. We had a seat at every table, and so we didn't have any priorities. We were just responding to the community's priorities. I'd like to see us kind of shift that model, and where we are strategically deciding the tables where we want to sit and whether we want to lead the work forward with those partners. And I think that's what's so different about what's happening in the Alamo district, which is the example that I used. Within the context of the wages and programs and poverty, this is a big topic in the United States. I mean, it's easy to say we don't want to graduate students into poverty, but frankly, from a collective impact perspective, a lot of the credentialed jobs in communities are in areas that are not well paying: early childhood, protection, emergency support. Many of those occupations don't pay a family sustaining wage. So to say that we're not going to graduate students into poverty means, well, are we going to cut those programs? The answer from my perspective is no, but we need to find ways through that work with our community to have a voice in helping to raise wages. And if we can't do that, then we think about our relationship with that student who gets their first job in a childcare center as a credentialed early childhood provider, as a learner for life. And we really work to revamp our systems so that we become career matching organizations, so that learner can keep coming back and back and back for more credentials, and that we do that in deeper partnership with the employer community and the community-based organizations in our community. Because that's the whole, it's in the best interest of the entire community if we're able to do that. So that's very theoretical. But that's just some of my thinking around what I'm thinking for the future of what collective impact might look like.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us. Let's have one more round of applause to show our appreciation for Karen's input. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Innocent to wrap up the day and to take us through the last 10 minutes. So this will be my final word. I want to suggest, Bill and Innocent, that from the discussion I've participated in, it's really my first exposure to the concept of collective impact. I don't think that we're all understanding it and on the same page. And it strikes me that the document, the framework document, never attempts to explain it. And I'm wondering if it's a concept which has a whole lot more currency in the US and means something there that is different from the kind of lay interpretation, if I may call it that we might put onto it. You may want to address that in your closing comments, but I think that we're probably not yet. It's such a core concept to the document, and yet I don't think we all know what it means. I don't think I know what it means. Let me speak for myself. Okay, I'll hand over to Innocent. You're going to take over and wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. So maybe I think I'm going to wrap up, but probably maybe starting on that note, I think that's a very, very important, the observation. So I think rather than go into depth now about it now, we're going to take it as a key point to elaborate on as we go forward. But I think just to suffice, what suffices is that for Siyaphumelela, it's actually the concept of collective impact. It's not a new one. Right from the beginning, the concept of Siyaphumelela was anchored in the idea of collective impact, which is so if you Google up online, so Ashton, is it at collectiveimpact.org? So you'll kind of see the framework on which it is based, consisting primarily of 4 key elements, which is so it includes the roles and responsibilities. It involves the role of the backbone organization. So just remind me, Riashna, the common agenda, and then the 4th one, just and shared measurement. So that's essentially so it's Siyaphumelela has been anchored on that right from the start, but I think it's an important one, Prof. We shouldn't take it for granted. We'll take a moment to see how we can elaborate it in the framework. So it remains for me to, I think, first of all, obviously thank Dr. Stout very much for making the time and being patient when we were running behind time, and to share those really insightful remarks and lessons in leadership, which, as you can see, we carefully, but we were very deliberate and intentional in inviting Dr. Stout to share these remarks with us at this point in time, because we are at a particular journey where I think you would agree with me that the most, if not all, of the lessons that she shared resonate very much with where we are. So thank you, Dr. Stout, for that. And so in the media space, I would kind of say, so the soundbite of the at the end of the day, if you wanted to take this to ENCA, whereas in the US they are saying colleges should not graduate students into poverty. The similar one in South Africa that has kind of been making the rounds is that institutions, which is broadly including universities in South Africa, must not become waiting rooms institutions must not become unemployment waiting rooms for students in South Africa. So places where they are just passing time before they just go into the market and idle about. So in concluding, I think I would just want to map around up to propose 3 next steps, which is by way of continuing this conversation and process. So obviously one, so it's probably 3 or 4, just to quickly. The one is obviously again to emphasize is that the conversation with Dr. Stout continues tomorrow. She's one of the keynote, she's the keynote speaker at the opening plenary tomorrow at starting at 2 o'clock. So please don't miss that. And then the second one to flag is that this particular conversation is continuing here in the same place tomorrow morning. We are hosting a breakfast roundtable, and this leadership group will be joined by a group of a number of funding partners from corporate philanthropy and the other foundations to engage to dive deeper into the conversation, particularly about sustaining this work and the shifts that we are seeing in the funding environment and what that means for that. So look forward to that conversation tomorrow. It's the time, again, is 9 to 9:30. Is coffee and networking with the people, and then we start sharp at 9:30, and then we're hoping to conclude sharp. It's going to be a very sharp session, 90 minutes. We hope to conclude at 11 o'clock, and then more space for networking afterwards, and then we transition to Birchwood for the opening plenary. Then the next one to flag is specifically about the conversation on employability and economic mobility. So the Wednesday plenary session is exactly on this topic, featuring input from Nicola Branson from Saldru, as well as we'll also have Joanna Preston, who is the head of talent at FNB, but she's also the chair of SAGIA, the South African Graduate Employers Association. So again, in continuing this conversation, not a session, we encourage the leaders in this room to make sure that you don't miss that conversation. Then in terms of this process, specifically 2 things to then flag up, and then I'll shut up and we can go. So the one is the leadership forum itself. So going forward, so as you remember, we started this conversation last year. So last year we called it the Leadership Indaba. So some of you attended that. It was a mix of VCs and DVCs as well. And the agenda last year was really mainly to reflect on the journey with Siyaphumelela so far. And so, because last year they ended up with so there was a leadership in Indaba, and then we were gonna. So this was happening at Monte Casino, but after that we had to shift it to the Indaba Hotel, and so there was some confusions about. So is this leadership at the hotel or at the conference or what? And so as we're preparing for this this year, we kind of also decided to avoid the confusion in terminology, hence the renaming of the forum to the Leadership Forum, but it's still the same grouping. So we kind of now feel like we have the momentum to propose that we make a commitment that this actually becomes a regular gathering every year ahead of the conference. We convene this gathering as a forum of the leaders behind the work. And of course, the agenda will always be different depending on what we are trying to solve for this time. So we'd like to, at least from our side as the conveners and organizers, we'd like to make that commitment to continue convening this group. And then beyond that, I think it doesn't suffice to just leave leadership to just convening once a year. And we hope there's a lot, as you can see, for us to engage with. And it's not easy to just solve it in 1 3-hour meeting in an afternoon. So we will be exploring other ways of keeping this forum connected and engaged beyond this meeting. So we'll please help us with ideas, whether that might be at the very least, probably maybe it's an intervening online check-in at some point in the middle of the year, so that at the very least this forum then connects twice per year, once in person and then once virtually. So that's a proposal that we are making. And then beyond that, so in terms of getting the hands dirty and into the trenches and doing the work, As you know, Siyaphumelela has always had the structure of an advisory committee, which works much more closely on a day-to-day with the backbone organization to provide support, technical support and guidance, and in driving the work and strategic direction. So we are proposing to expand that grouping from previously it was about eight or so people. We're proposing to expand the advisory committee to potentially between 12 and 15 people. And so for that purpose, we would like to invite the Leadership Forum to help us with nominations. So those nominations of additional people, I think we're looking for an additional 5 or so people. So those nominations, they don't necessarily have to be, they could be people in this room, but they could also be people beyond this room. So the people who have the expertise and the stature in this space to be able to come on that and help us drive this work. So we will send an ad memoir in your inboxes to remind you to do that. But in the next 2 weeks or so, if you could help us, please make those nominations, motivate the people. It could be yourself if you want to motivate yourself. We'll be open to that, and then we'll kind of constitute and then share the information on the advisory committee and how it helps us to take this work forward. So I think with that, I've then covered everything. So Bill, Ephraim, Ashton, Alice, please remind me if I've left out anything. So that's it's the working group that has been driving the plans for this. So if not, then so it remains for me to then, once again, thank you very much for coming to this conversation. It's not a goodbye because we're seeing you again tomorrow. But lastly, to take a moment to thank Prof Price for taking the time, for accepting our invitation to obviously come and not just help us with the flow of the conversation, but share his leadership, his insights. And as you can see, he ended on that note by stretching us and challenging us on what we need to elaborate and elucidate further in the framework. And we hope, Prof, that we may be able to continue drawing on your experience and insight as we take this phase of the work forward. And for that, I need to not forget to hand this over to you. I don't know what's inside. If it turns out to be a bomb, I'm going to be there. Final, so I wouldn't, this would be remiss. I think the final people to thank in the room and acknowledge, it's Zoe Bok and Simpiwe Kunene. I think if you can stand up, some, I don't know, some may still not remember you, Zoe and Simpiwe. So yeah, not only have they walked that journey, but as you know, they are Siyaphumelela scholars, and they continue championing and working with us on that journey. Simpiwe, he referenced the work that he was doing with schools in the past few days, and he will be presenting that at the conference. So thank you, Simpiwe, for sharing that, and we look forward to you sharing. Zoe will also be speaking as well at the reception tomorrow. So once again, we look forward to hearing your steering and very inspiring words at the reception. So thank you for always being with us and bringing this student voice. So, sorry, you're right, is it? All right, okay. we don't want to end on that note. So on that note, thank you very much, colleagues, and do have a wonderful evening. So for those who drove, please remember your parking tickets to pass by Nomblelo, who is at the desk here to help with the validation of your parking tickets. And for any logistics, please see our logistics team. Thank you very much and have a blessed and safe evening.
Thank you.